Welcome to the Ionic Show. I'm Ben Sperry.
I'm Max Lynch.
I'm Matt Netkow.
I'm Josh Thomas.
And this is the new Ionic Show, or a new version of it. As those of you who are at least watching might be able to tell, we're doing this one semi-remote, a little less pre-planned, a little less formal. And we just wanted to hang out with some of the core team here today and talk about, I don't know, what do we want to talk about today, guys? We want to talk about Ionic. We got a lot to talk about. It's been a while since we've had one of these, so I think this is going to be fun.
Should we give the audience a little backstory about why it's taken so long?
Yeah, why don't we do that? We were talking about this before we hit record, so we might as well just talk about it now.
So we tried to film a new Ionic show for Ionic 4 2 times, and we had this fancy video camera that
we have a very nice
Bordy encouraged us to buy.
Yes.
Thanks, Bordy. But without his help manning it, turns off after 30 minutes of recording. So guess exactly what happened? We filmed for 30 minutes.
Oh, we're
programmers, so we're not video recorders.
We filmed for 30 minutes. We talked live to a non-filming camera for well over an hour, twice, on 2 separate occasions, only to come back and find that the camera auto shuts off after 30 minutes.
I was very close to smashing a $3,000 camera.
Yeah, it was bad. So it's taken a while. So apologies, everyone. We figured this might be an easier way for us to get this stuff out the door. And frankly, I think we all might just enjoy it a little bit more as well. It allows us to maybe be a bit more ourselves and just hang out. And we want you to hang out with us.
That would be nice.
So what's new? Let's let the pleasantries begin. I want to talk about Ionic 4 because that was what we were originally talking about when we tried recording the first 2 failed attempts. It was just going to be Ionic 4. And here we are several months later. We had a lot more to talk about. But I still feel like we should chat about Ionic 4 because it's a big deal.
Ionic 4, Capacitor, Stencil One is about to come out, but we should definitely start with Ionic 4, I think.
Yeah. And we have our stencil expert, our in-house stencil expert here. I don't know where Josh is going to end up being on the recording of this, but we get to grill Josh on stencil stuff. But yeah, let's talk about Ionic 4. So it's out. We released it in January. What we called Ionic for everyone. It was a long time coming getting that out. So we're still really excited about it. The feedback has been fantastic. And I figure it's worth us maybe just diving in a little bit about like what, for those of you who don't know yet, or maybe you haven't tried it yet, or are thinking about upgrading, what's new with it. And there's a lot new with it.
Well, I'm happy to dig into the backstory. Maybe Josh can fill in some pieces, whatnot. So everyone kind of knows Ionic as historically mobile for Angular. And we started building Ionic back in 2013-ish, and that was when AngularJS 1.1 or 1.2 was just coming out. And Angular was pretty much the only way back then to do custom components. So, if you were doing like components in the jQuery world, if you remember, you had to like every time that something changed, you had to reinitialize these components, like wrap them with the jQuery call. So anytime like the content changed, you had to make sure you redid this, and that ended up being really, really difficult. But Angular had something really cool where if you built a directive, Angular would automatically load it whenever it was rendered. So for us, that was like the dream of custom components, custom HTML tags. So we basically built the whole thing around Angular. Fast forward to 2015, the Angular team was obviously redoing Angular for the new like modern JS TypeScript world, and we obviously jumped on that because we weren't about to get left behind, and Ionic was seeing a lot of success and figured we need to move to the latest and greatest, and Angular, I'll just call it Angular, ended up being really, really awesome. Still is today. We love it. And Ionic 3, 2, and 3 was kind of the best version ever.
We just had the Angular folks out here this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Igor and
and
Mishko,
Igor.
that was awesome. Tons of awesome stuff, exciting stuff about what they're working on. But we've, people don't really always realize that when we started Ionic back in the day, our goal was not necessarily to focus on any specific like framework, quote unquote framework. That wasn't really a terminology yet. It was just kind of these like third-party libraries. We wanted to build components for the web. And so if you think about how do you build components for the web, well, you use this thing called web components. It didn't exist back then, but it does today. And so with Ionic 4, we wanted to go and go back to that original dream and build this collection of components that were, looked really good, were high performance because we focus a lot on making things fast and doing things right, but could be like extended and remixed in a million different ways for all the different kinds of things that you want to build. And so Ionic 4, we started working on that back in, I want to say 2017.
And I think, we knew that web components were probably going to be our answer. I mean, I remember when we were on Ionic 2 and we were talking internally about this whole web components thing and how exciting it was, but it didn't feel like it was ready. And when we started our Ionic 4 sort of internal musings on what or vision questing, maybe I could say.
Yeah, that was that was Adam's vision quest.
Adam certainly went on a vision quest on Ionic 4 stuff. And so Stencil actually, I think it was birthed out of that. Adam birthed Stencil out of that vision quest. Although, that's a strange image. It wasn't originally going to be Stencil. I remember it was something we were going to use like Snabby Dom. Do you remember that, Josh? It was
it was actually going to be Ionic 4, and it was built on Snab Dom at the time.
Right.
And that was based on some feedback we received from Evan Yu.
That's right. We had a call with him, right? And then
Yep.
Yeah.
But we started working on Ionic 4 and then realized, hey, there's a lot of value here.
Yeah.
So likely a lot of other people could find value from this rather than just us.
Right.
And that's how Stencil came about.
Yeah. And I think like Stencil, I mean, here we are talking about Stencil, but it was always meant to be like a solution to our problem. And I think the like really happy story that came out of it was that it ended up solving problems for a lot of other people and a lot of other teams. And that was like the happy accident sort of that happened, that we weren't really expecting, which is awesome. And we definitely will want to dig in on that.
Well, let's just like tell people a little bit about why Stencil had to exist. I mean, if you were going to build web components back in 2016, a lot of people would say like, they're not ready yet. They're not ready yet. And like, they weren't ready yet, but there were a lot of ways that you could make them ready. And some of those ways were having like a tool like Stencil to generate and include polyfills that certain browsers could use so they would run, or do things like lazy loading components or loading them in collections, like a bunch of interesting things that you don't get out of the box with the normal API. And so as we started building Ionic 4 with the goal of it being this agnostic component kit, we had to do all that stuff because we used to rely on features like that in Angular, and we didn't have that anymore. So we had to kind of rebuild pieces of that to build these components, and that ended up becoming Stencil.
Yeah.
I still remember the conversation where Max and Adam and I were standing next to my desk, where we're all like super, super excited about what we're building. And then that's when Max came up with the name.
Okay. Yeah.
The name? Yeah, I think
you did. Because
Yep.
I wanted to call it something else, and you were like, "No, we're not calling it that." I can't remember what it was. It was like Everest or something, or it was like Tundra.
Tundra.
Oh, no, that was a
That was
capacitor.
capacitor.
There was something else I wanted to call it, but Stencil grew on me because, and Manu talks about this in his talk at JSConf Berlin, which is like Stencil is literally like a stencil. Like it gets out of the way, you paint your component, your web component, and then Stencil goes and hides, and it's not included in the end result. It literally stamps out components for you. I think it's a brilliant name, Max.
Yeah, that was, thank you. I thought of it all by myself.
Yeah.
But
And then I had a day to spit out a logo and branding for it.
what I like about it is it really does feel like the stencil like drawing tool. You know, you don't see
That's
it
what
in product. So it just kind of, well, it's funny because when we did that, we got an email from another stencil, like a company. Basically it was like, no,
Yeah, he was like,
all our SEO.
Sorry. We're sorry.
But that brand's that whole space is pretty like,
yeah, they don't really compete. So good luck.
Same with capacitor. You search capacitor and you just find a bunch of electronics parts.
Yeah. Well, I know
Yeah, that's why
capacitor. We had called capacitor. Didn't we used to call it avocado?
Yeah.
And then Avocode reached out to us and they're like, "No, please."
In that exact voice.
And so that's my voice of other people. So we were like, all right. And so we came up with, I wanted to call it Tundra. And then you were like, no. It's Cap. And now I like Capacitor because I love the shorthand Cap. But it's partially because I'm a Marvel fan and I love Captain America and I love calling him Cap. But so I get to call Capacitor Cap. Anyway, so back to Ionic 4. So we moved to web components. So I have some things here I feel like I wanted us to chat about. Obviously, it solved a lot of our framework dependency issues. I think it solved, maybe not solved, but it helped fix a lot of what we felt were like performance setbacks that we were being held back by. Ionic 4 is like super performant. It's a lot smaller size, and the other benefit that we haven't talked about is it allowed the Ionic team to work on Ionic again, which like I think a ton of people don't get that. We spent like a ton of time and resources and people and energy just getting Ionic to work with Angular. And it's necessarily no fault of Angular. It's just we wanted the experience to be great, and Angular was going through a lot of change and is constantly updating and changing. And so we always felt like we had to stay in parity with them and make things work with them. And like that has costs. It's a lot of work. And so while we spent many years and time doing a lot of that stuff, it meant that we weren't spending as much time focusing on what we feel like we do really well, which is creating amazing front-end experiences for mobile using the web. Our components, design, gestures, animations, that sort of stuff. And so like one of the things that Stencil and moving to web components has allowed the Ionic team to do, and specifically for Ionic, only for Ionic 4, is like get back to doing that stuff, which has been really energizing, I would say, internally as well, like for all of us here. I don't know about you guys.
Yes, I agree. There was a comment on YouTube, which is where the best comments live.
Best, yeah.
It was something about how like I'm glad Ionic is moving to the new Angular because I don't know why they threw out the old Angular router in Ionic 3. And I was just like, whoa, back up. When we started Ionic for Angular 2, Angular didn't have a router. If I remember correctly, its build system was much more like kind of pieced together. And so we had to build our app scripts to actually build Ionic apps. We had to build our own router to actually do routing and navigation. And so like that stuff didn't exist. So it's not that we threw it out, but we had to build a bunch of stuff. But today, like Angular's router is awesome. Their build stuff is amazing. We don't have to do any work. It basically removed the need for us to do all that stuff so we can focus on components. Mm-hmm. And that's like a reality in today, a luxury that we have today. So we're thrilled about that. But we did that because we had no choice back then.
Yeah, I can say that the Ionic team is all really excited about where Angular is today.
Oh,
it's a lot different.
I'm thrilled about it. There was a thread. So the Hacker News comments yesterday, I was reading them about the Angular 8 release.
Also, the best comments.
Yes, the second best comments live on Hacker News.
Number one in the world.
And first of all, the comments were really, really positive. And one of the things that I whether you no matter what framework you use, like you have to appreciate the fact that like Angular is really doing well with this kind of batteries included approach. And someone mentioned that what they love about Angular is they'll load up an Angular project and they know exactly how it works. It follows all these conventions. The routing system, it's one router. It's not like 5 different ones like you have in React. State management, all this stuff is much more like decided. And so if you are someone that wants to jump in and have like consistency, they've nailed that. And that's something that we love too. We all have different opinions on the frameworks that we like for different reasons, but got to give them credit for really nailing that.
I mean, and Josh is our big in-house React guy, and I would say Josh probably would share the sentiment. I think they do a lot of stuff right.
They do, absolutely.
One of the things that I wanted to pick your guys' brains on, since we get a lot of questions about it, is with regards to web components, is Shadow DOM and like how that all fits in. Anyone want to take that? Because I feel like we're constantly hearing questions about it.
Oh, that's a doozy.
Yeah.
Josh?
We've had many conversations in the past where we were completely against Shadow DOM, and then we were 100% for Shadow DOM, and now we're somewhere in the middle. So we think that Shadow DOM has its place, and for building a component system, I think that Shadow DOM is a great solution for encapsulating CSS. And that's primarily the focus of what we use it for.
Yeah. I would say like what I love about it is we can publish kind of public theming APIs through CSS variables, and it keeps all the internals isolated, but you can still like customize them. And the nice thing here is like a lot of the difficulty people had when they were wanting to upgrade to new versions of Ionic is they couldn't because they had written a bunch of selectors to modify the internals inside of our components. And that seems like a nice thing to do on day one. Like I used to do that all the time with Bootstrap. I tore that thing apart. But the problem is I couldn't upgrade then because I had modified it so much. And so like, don't depend on what we use under the hood. So having this public theming API it's really, really nice in that regard. I will say like my personal opinion is I've used Shadow DOM for building components, and I've used it for building apps. So we're working on a desktop IDE for Ionic called Studio, and that uses web components entirely with Stencil, and you use Shadow DOM in a lot of places. It's weird at first when you use it like that. And I would say that I don't love it for applications. I think it's like kind of unnecessary overhead. I know exactly, I want my like styles and themes to apply everywhere. However, you do get some of those encapsulation, like isolation benefits. So I agree. I'm kind of in the middle on it now that I know how the APIs work, but it's like a big like leap to like understand like, okay, am I in the shadow root? Am I not? Like, what's my host element? Like it's a lot of like overhead.
Yeah, I think
it sounds like context. Like depending on what you're building, it can be great, or it can not be the right solution, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think one of the things it affords us is that with Ionic, we have this, we call it like a design API where you can have CSS variables that come in and change the CSS, or you can have props that come in and change how the component works, and then events coming back out of it. So it's this really nice encapsulated defined API that we can keep consistent throughout versions in the future.
Netkow, thoughts?
Yeah, I would say as someone, building apps, I'm definitely not an expert on Shadow DOM, but from what I've seen, again, from CSS theming, and as someone who's probably throughout the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or web stack, my CSS skills are probably the weakest. I appreciate that, in terms of upgrading, knowing that, I'm always in the mindset of a developer on the ground, right? Like building apps at a company, and I come from that background. So my preference, I definitely get that. And I think we want to keep talking about that, about how, at the end of the day, you have there's real work to be done building apps, and whether you're, a hobbyist or at a large enterprise, right? And that power of just having the tools and these types of concepts get out of your way, but still give you a lot of power is where I think, personally, I think that's makes it worth it with the approach we've taken. Even if it sacrifices to some small degree the customizability, I don't really get that from you guys. You can, if you think there's more to talk about that, but I think it's,
Speaking of customizability, I feel like that's a good segue into the other big thing that Ionic Framework v4 shipped with, which was a totally different type of, or rather improved, I would say, type of theming and customization of components, like visually, and specifically by means of CSS variables, which we are taking advantage of for V4.
Yeah, and
Which
if you've
is
seen
awesome.
if you've seen the dark mode demos, like
Yeah.
that magic comes from CSS variables. The fact that
Oh,
you update like one single thing and have this whole theme apply is like that. You couldn't do that easily or really at all before.
Kramer had an interesting idea about that. He pinged me yesterday and said we should think about maybe putting in one of our starters like a setting, a toggle setting, where if you flip it, it turns the whole thing dark, and we have put into the starter apps like some sort of dark mode option, which would be dope.
As he would say, he's not wrong.
I agree. He's correct in this case. Yeah, and so why do we move to like what I guess pushed us over the edge to decide that CSS variables were the right choice for V4? But like what are like the benefits? Yeah.
I mean, it's a requirement for Shadow DOM to drill styles down. It's the easiest way to drill through to Shadow DOM. But I think that in the early days, playing with CSS variables and seeing how well a browser would respond to just simple changes to where it just propagates throughout a system, I think we saw a lot of power there and realized what it would do for our app developers.
Yeah. Also, a public API that's not going to break.
Yeah, like
big thing.
We were able to build that theming tool pretty easily. I would say the other thing is like we can't guarantee that we're in a CSS preprocessor environment like SAS or whatever, and that's how we did the theming before. So the fact that we can't guarantee that because we're supposed to work everywhere, CSS variables is like the glue that'll tie all that stuff together in the modern API world.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think those are
really just awesome.
Yeah,
they're freaking awesome. Like,
I mean, yeah, it takes a little bit, I think, to get used to. Like we've heard from people who have tried it. It's either holy shit, I love this, or pardon my language, or
how
it's
dare you?
How do I do this? How do I don't know how to do CSS variables, or this seems really complicated at first. I think once you kind of like wrap your head around it, though, you actually find that it's really valuable. It unlocks a lot of superpowers for you.
So that reminds me, I was going to mention, like people talk about some of these new APIs like Shadow DOM, Web Components, whatever, and they there's kind of there's two sides to the web platform debate, I guess. Like you've got people who feel like we should be moving to these APIs. They're going to kind of quote unquote kill frameworks, and frameworks have their own custom component models. So they do in a way compete with these like Web Components and Shadow DOM. I think where we're at least me personally, is I think that building components and custom design systems is really the killer use case for Shadow DOM and Web Components. I would totally say that if you're building an app, like you don't need to use these APIs. And just to rehash kind of what we said, it's really all about building custom components. So for you guys as developers using this stuff, we're trying to make sure you don't have to use those same APIs if you don't want to. In some cases with CSS variables, like we have to do it that way, and we think it's long-term the right way to do it. But just to be clear, these APIs are something that you don't need to use for your own apps. Like if you're using Angular or React, you're not going to probably be using Shadow DOM at all. You might not even be using CSS variables. So these are things that we like internally that give us some cool features, but you don't need to use them for your own apps.
Yep, 100% agree. They're great for design systems, but they're not necessarily for people building applications.
So I feel like that's the big stuff. That was really like, and that's a lot in terms of like, what's new. The benefit though, I think, between V3 and V4 is that upgrading, we put a lot of work into making sure that like the upgrade experience or migration experience is pretty straightforward. And I would say I've heard, time and time again that from people who have upgraded that it's actually pretty seamless. At least it's a lot better than the upgrade from Ionic 1 to Ionic 2, which was essentially upgrading from AngularJS to Angular 2. Whereas this upgrade from Ionic V3 to V4 is a lot more straightforward.
Let's talk about that for a second. If you're using Ionic 2 or 3 today and you want to move to Ionic 4 with Angular, you should keep in mind that all those services you wrote, all those custom Angular components, all those directives, they literally will work identically in the new version. It's just Angular, right? The parts that you'll have to change are your templates, because we've changed some of the components a little bit, not drastically. You'll recognize everything, and it's fairly similar. Move to the Angular router, which is a good thing anyways. You should be excited about moving to the standard Angular stuff, right? But really, it's
want
like,
you to be.
yeah, you better be excited. You don't have a choice.
Got to be on the latest.
But that's the whole Angular attitude too, is like you should be on the latest all the time. And that's something they push pretty heavily. So we love that, and we want to like get out of the way. So you should do that. But just keep in mind, it's like all that stuff you've written, all the stuff that doesn't rely on the components, that's literally the same in the new version with Angular. So don't fear. Don't
Have no fear.
That, and I think there's a pretty detailed guide for the changes that actually need to be made from the Ionic components going from 3 to 4.
Isn't there a lint or two or something?
That I'm not sure of, but Brandy went through a lot of effort to make the process really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brandy, Mike, the rest of the team, we put a lot of effort into that migration guide, and there is a linter. That's true. So, we knew we really wanted to get ahead of those kind of fears. And like Max said, I think that between those, not only reusing your code for so much of it and just being better, let's talk about being better positioned for the future as well. Because, again, like we're making active efforts to make the upgrade process over time easier. And now that we've let the frameworks do their thing in terms of CLI tooling and all those kind of things, not only are we moving faster, I was going to say from the DevRel side of things, like it's hard to keep up with all the, 1 to 2 week releases, which is a good thing, for us and for you, because it just shows how fast we're moving and putting out amazing features, right?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I have to say, like, just really on that note, like, just since we've released V4, it's allowed us to all the stuff that we just talked about has allowed us, the Ionic team, to get on a much better cadence of releasing and do it. It's just much more manageable. I don't even think we've missed. I mean, essentially every 2 weeks we push out a new update with bug fixes, new features, and we just put up a brand new release notes doc in the framework docs, which is dope. Randy and I worked on that. Actually, speaking of which, new docs as well. That's another big thing.
Yes, the docs are
the new docs.
So dope,
really
to use that word again.
So and we have so many like.
That was our goal. Make it dope. That's what Ben said. He's like, all right, guys,
make it dope.
And then everyone knew exactly what to do.
Yeah. I'm serious when I say it's going to be dope. And let me tell you, it is dope. So actually last week we just put out a brand new search experience in the docs, which is something we had in the beta docs. We didn't have in the new final docs. So people are really excited about that. All you need to do is hit / or Command K if you're a Slack user, which is like second nature to me. So I've just used that now instinctively. So check that out. And we have a ton of stuff like, Netkow and I are working, and a couple others on the team are working on improving some of the like flow of the guide and usability and onboarding experience, what it's like to just get started with Ionic. I think there's a lot of areas we can improve and write more content. And so keep an eye out for that. I think the docs are going to be one of the best places to hang out when you're building Ionic apps.
It has a framework switcher too.
Ooh.
That's right.
Does that mean that we're going to support other frameworks?
No, I don't know about that. That's a rumor, right?
So let's see what stuff's next for Ionic before because we got a lot of other stuff we want to talk about. But I want to at least have some time for us to discuss V4. Is there anything we should be keeping an eye out for?
So yes, but I also just want to reiterate how excited we are about V4 as a team. So someone asked me the other day, what's the reception been to V4 and what's the impact been and all this stuff? Because you spend all this time working on a new version and it's a little different. There's always a risk that you're going to lose people or cause problems. But seriously, it's been awesome. If you look at all of our NPM installs, they're growing quickly. I want to say that Ionic Angular is getting close to, the new version of Ionic for Angular is not too far off from passing Ionic 3 version of Angular. The reception has been really, really good. And on top of that, now that we've been putting out betas for Vue.js and React, it's just been exciting feeling like the Ionic community is about to like really grow kind of pretty quickly. The reception from those communities has been really positive. We should probably talk about React a little bit more, and I'll save some of my thoughts on that. But the reception there has been really good.
Well, even Vue. I mean, Josh was at VueConf last year and announced the what was that, the alpha, Ionic Vue alpha?
The alpha, and then Mike announced the beta at another Vue conference.
Right. Yeah, we've been blowing up the Vue community a little bit now that you say it, or now that you mention it. And it has felt that way. It's felt like there's new voices in the room, and Ionic has been the Angular show for a long time. I mean, and we love Angular. We're still big fans of Angular, but it's not the only framework that web developers are building with, and it's been exciting to see new people pop in that come from the Vue world or come from the React world, and give Ionic take a first spin, and it's exciting.
Yeah, it's a lot of new people have often never heard of Ionic, so I mean we've got a lot of work to do to get the word out. But I'm thrilled, and I think the community should be thrilled because you're learning Ionic, and whether or not you're using React or Vue or Angular to do it, the core concepts are the same, the components are the same, the native stuff is the same, and so I think the community is going to have more people available to help, more people creating content, more people doing all this good stuff. So we're like, it's going really, really well. I think we're all breathing, not a sigh of relief, but just, it's always, you never know how these things are going to go. And when they go well and you feel like people understand our vision, they're excited about it. Like constantly people are saying like, that was such a good idea to support, more than Angular. And, I maybe I left Angular because the new version didn't resonate with me and I moved to something else. And now I'm excited about coming back to Ionic. That stuff is really, really encouraging. We love that. Again, it's not to pick favorites with any frameworks, but people have preferences.
Well, yeah. And I think, you're right. The other thing is like at some point what I'm excited about is the potential of using Ionic without a framework as well. If you don't want to use one, or if you want to just get started quickly and maybe you're not ready to go in on one particular framework yet. And that's okay too. And that's another great thing about Ionic 4 is that you can just use it ad hoc.
That reminds me of a teacher emailed me a few weeks ago and was basically saying that they want to teach like a framework, like they want to build mobile apps, and all the other options are really complicated. What it's like doing native obviously is really difficult unless the class is fairly advanced. But even like doing other frameworks that require you to learn like React or learn Angular, the teacher said like they spent so much time just teaching React and it was too difficult for this class. And so I told them like, well, one of the things you can do with Ionic 4 that's interesting is you could just use the HTML tags directly. And so you could build, UIs and experiences without really having to learn a quote unquote framework. And that really, really resonated with him. That's something that we've just naturally supported because they're just web components, but we haven't really pushed it. But I feel like there's a lot of legroom there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think that's exciting. It's something we don't talk about very often, but it exists.
Well, I think if I can chime in, the important takeaway is an investment in using and learning Ionic is an investment in web skills, right? Not things that can stay with you for a long time to come, right? There's not a lot of overhead to use the framework. It's all just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you're not literally learning something custom that's going to be irrelevant in a year. That's always been my favorite part, not to pick on other technologies, but when you have different other solutions, especially for mobile, that guide you down a certain path, if that doesn't work out, you've invested a lot of time that doesn't stick with, again, what we've always been about, web standards and web tech. And as you see, that's teacher example is perfect because you want to get started quickly and actually engage students in that case, and by building something quickly to hold their engagement, and going down a multi-week path for some other framework might be really challenging to hold attention and really get them anyone jazzed about continuing with software development in general. That's always
So
a challenge, I think.
I totally agree, and I think what we need to do is, like these schools and these classes, they're teaching web development. When you think about like what are people learning, what's what are people coming out of schools knowing? It's basic web development skills, HTML, CSS, some basic JavaScript, and so the fact that like we can give these students the ability to focus on learning those skills, like you said, but get what feels and looks like a actual app is really interesting and something that we need to push a lot harder, because you're right, it is just learning web development.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's what drives us all here. Honestly, we're just all obsessed with the web, so that's all you're gonna get from us.
Gosh, go get a charger.
I'll be right back.
His laptop's about to die. While he's gone,
If we wanted to prove that this was off the cuff and this would be a pretty well staged event, but this is real.
I don't want to talk about Ionic React without Josh here because he built it.
Well, he was.
Oh, he's back.
Josh was a big key part of Ionic React and Ionic Vue, frankly. But maybe we can save the deep dive of Ionic React for another Ionic show, and we'll just have Josh back on. Unless you feel like we should dive in today, I just want to make sure we get to talking about Capacitor and Stencil One, which by the time you're listening to has gone into final release.
That's fair. Let's save React for another time. I think we've hinted enough about it. All I'll say right now is like it actually works really well. It's in beta. I've been using it for a personal app, so I've been dogfooding it a lot. It still is a little rough around the edges, so we're going to be pushing out a new release. We're going to be pushing out the quote unquote final or production ready release in June, hopefully. So if you
that's the goal.
Don't want some rough edges, probably don't use it until then. But if you're willing to use it, it works really well. We're thrilled about it. The reception's been really good. It feels like there's a huge void in the React community that is very willing and interested in using this, despite the fact that there are other options like React Native. So we're thrilled about that. But we should probably save that for another show.
Yeah, if you can tell, Max has a lot he wants to say about React.
I love it. I've been building like a real app with it, and I'm like, I can build so quickly, and I'm still using like I've gotten into React lately, so it's kind of like my quote unquote framework of choice. But like it feels like React, and I can use every single React library because it's using React DOM, whereas React Native is kind of you can't necessarily use every library because it's slightly different. But I love it. I'm obsessed with it.
Couldn't tell. Yeah, so let's save that. Josh, we just talked about Ionic React while you were out. Sorry about that.
It's a good topic while I'm out.
Well, you know what? We'll have you back on once Ionic React is out, and we'll do a deep dive on it. We're gonna want to have you show us around how it all works, how it was built, all that fun stuff. So, what's next for V4? I would say is in terms of what you can expect. I think we're going to be focusing on improving our components, getting them up to snuff, so to speak, with the latest and greatest mobile OSs, design standards, focusing on desktop. That's another big initiative of ours now. Perhaps server-side rendering, and getting more animations into the framework and showing people how to build custom experiences. That's something Max and I personally have been working on, and we're really excited about. And so stay tuned for some stuff there coming out in a bit.
That's actually something I'm super excited about. Seeing the demos that you and Max are working on.
Yeah, the recipes.
Yeah, it's
one thing
intense.
One thing we haven't done a great job of is like showing people that you can actually build native quality UI experiences on the web. And I think one reason we don't see those as much is because some of the APIs are a little bit more obscure, like pointer events, touch events. There's different browsers you have to support. It's unclear how to do animations that are efficient, but we will show everyone that if you put the right pieces together in the right way, you can build really awesome, like gesture-driven UIs, things that you see in like top native apps. And so keep an eye out for that. we're
Yeah.
really, really pumped.
Yeah. And, if now that I'm thinking about it, like, a while ago, I think during Ionic 1 days, Max, you built a recipe very similar to the stuff we're working on now. I think it was what's that dating app? Clone.
Tinder.
It was a Tinder swipe card experience, and it was so popular. People loved it. I mean, I can't. It was almost annoying because you would just get tons of messages for months and even years after you put that out of people building Tinder for X apps with Ionic based off of that recipe that you made. But I think it's a testament to the value of showing what's possible through cool recipes like that. So I'm excited to get back to this. I think you guys are going to really like what we have cooking.
So when are we going to build a WhatsApp recipe?
Oh boy. Don't ask Matt Kramer about that. Actually, if you're listening, please tweet Matt Kramer about whether or not he can build a WhatsApp clone for you. He loves it. So let's move on to
that. Keep an eye out for something, maybe.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, we'll see. Don't get anyone's hopes up. So what do we got? Where do we want to go from here? We could talk about Capacitor, which just went into 1.0 final after a good while. Or Stencil, which just went into its final release. Let's start with Capacitor. I feel like we should talk about Capacitor, and maybe clear the air a little bit about what it is, what its goals are, why we built it. We want to give some of the backstory there, Max.
Sure. So
since you were essentially the lead dev on getting it off the ground initially.
So yes. So obviously everyone knows that Ionic has used Cordova since day one, and we love Cordova. Cordova basically helps you package up a web app and run it natively on iOS and Android, with a nice way to expose native functionality to a web view, build plugins. There's lots of great plugins out there. It's a great community. We love it. However, we felt like there were a few as we started to use it more and invest in it more and hear from people using it, we felt like there were a bunch of changes that would really improve the concept. And at the same time, Ionic itself was also increasingly faced with the desire to support progressive web apps and Electron apps, among other things. And if you've used Cordova, you know that the web browser target is not really all that well supported. It's not. It's kind of. It was always kind of a use for testing and development, but not really for. You didn't build progressive web apps using the Cordova browser target. And Electron support was not really there either. There was Windows support, and Mac support, but not Electron. So, kind of combined with the desire to really just kind of try and experiment and see what a quote unquote Ionic version of that type of tool would look like. With the desire to support these platforms, we started working on Capacitor. And actually, I started working on it, I want to say, at the end of 2017. And so I think I spent like my winter break working on it. So that's how I vacation. But there were a lot of like principles behind Capacitor that were driven by kind of my own opinions about how I used Cordova. So for example, one of the things that I always, and this is a big point of contention, but I always preferred running my app and testing it in Xcode or Android Studio. And that there were a few really important reasons why I like doing that. For one, it's faster. So I could run on the simulator, I could run on the device, just press the play button, write in Xcode. It booted up more quickly. The experience was just a little more fluid than using it through the CLI. A lot of people disagree with that, but that's like kind of was my own opinion. At the same time, like anytime there was an issue with Cordova, like plugins got out of sync, platforms got messed up, it was frustrating that I had to go through this abstraction when I could probably have a bit easier time fixing it in Xcode by just Googling specific iOS related errors. So you were always going through this like custom layer that had its own way of doing things that was always going to be like a significantly smaller community than like native iOS development, because that's the superset there. So for me, like I was kind of like, I want to build a vanilla iOS project that links in this capacitor thing as like a CocoaPod. So it's using a familiar iOS development process. It uses Xcode to run the app, but underneath it's doing some interesting things that bring back that experience that people like about Cordova. So having plugins that are easy to build, having writing JavaScript to call native code, having tooling that lets you manage platforms. And we just decided like we could simplify a lot of what Cordova was doing. We could improve the development process for building those plugins. We could fix some things that really bothered us about Cordova, like device ready. I can't tell you how many issues there are out on our repos about why isn't device ready firing, blah, blah, blah. It's like, that was unnecessary to have device ready in 2019, 2018, whatever, because you can load all the JavaScript immediately when the page loads if you do it in a certain way. And so we fixed that. There's like a bunch of little things like that that we just wanted to patch up. And it culminates in what we've heard from developers as a really nice experience, in many ways nicer than Cordova. And so that's directly because we try to fix a bunch of those things.
Yeah, I think the goal was like, we're in many ways tied to Cordova for better or worse. And like, let's be real, there's a lot of great stuff about Cordova still. It's not, I'm not saying anything bad about Cordova, and it's, Cordova, PhoneGap, whatever, launched, I think, and validated this space that we're in. And so like we owe a ton to Cordova, and there's a lot of good there. But I also think being tied to it, we felt like, we didn't have control necessarily over ideas that we had around ways that we could improve the experience. And like, one of the things that we care about a lot is making the experience of building apps with Ionic great. And if you're going to, put your app in the App Store, which is, let's be real, the final destination of most apps that are built with Ionic, you're going to have to interface with something like Cordova, right? Well, we didn't have control over that experience. And so I think Capacitor, like Max said, a lot of the fixes that I think, we put into it, and experience improvements we put into it, came out of our desire to want to just make the best possible experience we can for any Ionic developer. And so it has less to do with like, oh, let's, replace Cordova or like Cordova sucks or anything like that. It's more, how do we regain control over crafting an awesome experience for our developers? And it became clear to us that the only way we would be able to do that, at least in a timely manner, is if we built what we were envisioning, built our own solution. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I will say that we had the luxury of doing this in 2017 when we started, but like, 2019, where there's a bunch of new like ways that people are building. There's modern JavaScript, there's TypeScript, there's like the web views, and the features available on iOS and Android are much better than what Cordova had when it started. And so some of this is just kind of spring cleaning, if you will, and moving to new APIs that just let you cut out a lot of stuff, but also improve the experience. And I think the reality is, like, I think we maybe could have done something like that in the Cordova project, like, a new version, but that it just felt like that was kind of against a lot of the principles of like that project, or they didn't necessarily want to have a huge upheaval like that. They wanted to be stable, stick around. And so I just, add all that stuff up, which makes a ton of sense. And we appreciate that. But it just felt like we had to do something on our own and try this out and see if it worked. It was a little bit of an experiment. And I would say it's been a really big success, and we're thrilled about it.
Yeah.
And one of the really cool things that so I've been working on a personal app, and it's just a different experience. Being able to go and npm install a capacitor library and start using plugin calls while developing entirely in the browser through Chrome. And if I'm using like Angular, it's through the Angular serve. If I'm using React, it's like create React app. I'm just building my app like a web app. And Capacitor, like, it fully embraces that development experience. Whereas with Cordova, you'd get like Cordova JS 404. You weren't able to actually build a lot of the app and have plugins run easily when you just ran your web app. And so that is one of those things that if you want to see kind of the first major difference, it's that you npm install Capacitor core, you import it like any other npm library into your JavaScript app, and you start using plugins no matter where it's running, like in the browser. That's kind of where it all started, was wanting to have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
I would say one of the big things for me was the demo that Mike had created, where he was showing how fast the Capacitor application was to load, because he was hiding the
it's like the splash.
Splash screen.
Splash.
Yeah.
It's like on device, as soon as the app is ready, hide the splash. And it feels like the boot time is like a quarter of what I would have expected with most
It's almost
applications.
instantaneous. I mean,
It was a really good demo.
Yeah.
Really hit home.
I think it actually surprised a lot of us.
Yeah.
I think, and Swerkit. So let's call out some people who are building some awesome stuff on Capacitor. Swerkit, the very popular workout app with millions of users. They were one of the earliest teams to actually jump on Capacitor and
Stencil
and Ionic 4. So they've been awesome. But they shared a tweet the other day that was like, here's the boot up time as a PWA that was using Capacitor core, so the JavaScript library, and it's super, super fast. And when they run it natively, it's also super fast. And so there's like a lot of stuff that culminates in just like faster boot times for apps. It's not just Capacitor. There's other components that impact that. But the experience is really good, and people are thrilled.
Southwest Airlines as well, I believe. Are they using? They're using Capacitor as well for the app that one of the devs just shared recently online on Twitter.
So this company, Maestro, this
yeah.
dev shop built an app for Southwest Airlines. They did an awesome case study. Hopefully we can link to some of this stuff, and definitely check that out. That's built with Capacitor. We asked the community, like, what are people building, and we wanted to give a few shout outs here. I think maybe this is a good time to do it.
Oh yeah, Netkow had a couple things you wanted to say.
You want to throw some props?
Throw some love out, Netkow?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thanks to everyone on the Capacitor Slack that's been running for quite a while now. Everyone giving their feedback, helping us with not only the product itself, but docs, everything. Huge thank you to everyone for that. A couple shout outs. We had asked, for anyone building any Capacitor apps today, there's, that's just a great examples. Patrick building volleyball score. We'll include all these in the show notes. Some of the links to the apps and stuff. Really cool scoreboard app that works, that syncs across devices, and you can use that to keep track of your games. And he's got just, oh my gosh, over 30,000 downloads and just close to near perfect 5-star review. I mean, that's
awesome.
You can't fake that. You know what I mean? That's what I love about it. It just goes to show it's just one aspect of an amazing app, but I just absolutely love that aspect. The team at SendCrop building with Ionic React, really cool stuff there. Company doing agricultural technology, building with Capacitor and React, and they've just had shared with me that they had absolutely no issues combining Ionic and Capacitor together, which is something we've been really putting in, as Ben and Max have mentioned, just putting huge effort into our developer experience across the board, from docs to the products themselves. And then I think the last one I wanted to shout out was Elmar, building out a kind of news radio app deployed on Android and iOS. Just all kinds of use cases, all kinds of example apps out there.
Awesome. And let us know
stuff.
anyone else who's building with us. We love to hear this stuff.
One other one that we can't name names, but there's one of our massive enterprise customers is building out an app that you very well likely will use.
Oh yes,
and that's using Capacitor and Ionic React. They were one of the earliest people on React, so
that's right.
Thrilled about that. I can't talk about it, but
I want to make a hint, but I don't want to get in trouble. But rest assured, you've probably heard of and or are using or or I'm not gonna say anything else. Their products. Josh, you had something you were trying to say?
I was just going to say that I didn't hear GoRanger in the list.
Oh boy,
Is GoRanger using Capacitor?
does GoRanger even still
Is it?
exist?
Not yet.
Still exists.
You got to go
What?
yell at Matt about that.
All right.
Sorry, I had to bring it up.
Yeah, we hear about it far too often.
Just a quick note on that. GoRanger is Matt Kramer, the other Matt number 2, as we like to call him, or him and I battle it out. But his Pokemon guide related app built on Ionic 3, and he's actually moving into Ionic 4 and Capacitor, right, buddy? We'll have make sure he watches this later.
Yeah. All right.
so
So a little shout out. Shout
you
out.
wanna
play
catch 'em all,
Pokemon, yeah,
Then you got to get GoRanger.
you got to get GoRanger. Follow along with GoRanger, Matt. He'll lead you to greatness and glory.
And
All right.
Pokemon.
So in lieu of time constraints, I want to move us on to Stencil so we can at least
Well, let's
unless there's anything left
let's-
with Cap.
yes, let's sum up Capacitor really quick.
Yeah.
1.0 went out, I believe, last week.
Yep.
We was kind of a big milestone for us because we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to like have a bunch of breaking changes, some last things that we want to get in. So that's done. We have a lot of things that we still want to work on, obviously. So we're not done with it by any means. But one of the things that we're doing now, it's kind of like now's the moment to really start integrating it into the Ionic experience. So you will start to see us pushing people to use it when they create new apps. We are encouraging, maybe forcing people who are using Ionic React and Ionic Vue through the CLI to use Capacitor. And so we're starting that process. That was kind of the big moment for us. We're adding support to it right now, to our AppFlow product, which helps you like push updates remotely, do cloud builds in your CI. That'll support Capacitor soon. We have some additional native plugins that we have for like enterprise use cases like biometric authentication, things like that. That will support Capacitor soon. So that's kind of the significance of this release for us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's important to mention. I mean, the goal here was like to tie the experience up, like getting back to like us caring about that, like start to finish experience. Like, what is it like to build an app with Ionic? Well, now we have more control over making that deployment, push into the app stores experience, I think, a lot better. So,
and credit to Mr. Netkow over there for going through and really going through all the docs, rethinking the architecture, checking the guides, updating it, trying to clarify things. So he really did an awesome job on that. The docs are a lot better, hopefully a lot more helpful. So if you want to complain or congratulate, find him on Twitter.
Yeah. Message him
thanks,
for
Max.
any complaint.
I'm here for all of it. Just send it on in. That's fine.
Praise and scorn.
All complaints, please send to Matt Netkow. All right. Moving on, if I'm allowed. Stencil One. I guess at this point, Josh, congratulations on helping get Stencil One out the door along with the rest of the team. It's a huge feat, and it's been also a long time coming. We've been working on Stencil since basically as long as we've been working on Ionic 4, pretty much.
Yeah. Was that in 2016? No. I'm sorry, 2018, wasn't it?
End of 2017. Yeah,
Was it?
Roughly the same time. Yeah, I mean, Stencil
can't
technically.
remember
Stencil technically. Yeah, I mean, it was something else before.
It
We called
feels
it
like a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. We'll just leave it at that. So, what can people expect with Stencil One?
Stability.
Stencil. Yeah.
I'm not sure the feature set that's really going with Stencil One. That's something they're not experiencing with Stencil 0.18. It's fairly
Stencil
close.
Not one.
Well, that's one of the I guess built-in features of Stencil in general is the versioning. Right. But I guess what's new and what's cool about it?
I believe one of the things that's cool is we're now using constructible style sheets for it, and we're also doing a much better job of compressing the files that get shipped to the browser. So the image that was provided to the beta blog by Manu showed the size of the to-do MVC app, and was it less than 3K? Is that right?
It was very small.
2.9.
Yeah, it was very small. Yeah, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, at some point, I mean, how small is this going to get? I mean, I don't know how much smaller you can get until we start getting into the quantum realm. I'm sorry. I've been watching too much Ant-Man. Keep going, Josh.
Just going to say that there's been a lot of interest, and we've been really surprised at the number of people who are building with Stencil in large organizations. I've been on calls for the last 4 or 5 months, and it's pretty impressive. Here's this product that we thought we were building for ourselves, and we'd open it up to the world to try, and the reception has been beyond our expectations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So what does that look like? Like, can you sort of break that down? Like, how is Stencil being used in the ways that I think you just mentioned that were kind of unexpected, and versus like how we use it, or how Ionic takes advantage of it? Or maybe they're kind of, actually they might be kind of similar.
It's very similar. It's actually something, we built it for our own purposes in the beginning of building. We call Ionic kind of like a design system, right? But it's a little more than that for us. But a lot of organizations are using it for the same purposes as building design systems for their internal applications. And the one thing that's made them all really excited about it is the fact that it's agnostic. So you can use Stencil to build components that work with any framework, or with no framework if you just want to plop it on a website.
Yeah, right.
And it's resonated really well with organizations. There's a lot of companies building with it. Probably a lot that are going to show up on our website very soon.
Yeah, or may already be on there.
Or maybe on there.
What is like the core motivating factor? I mean, it seems like for what we've seen, it's big companies that are driving a lot of that.
Yeah, I would say that being agnostic is one of the top reasons. Like having a centralized code base that they can build a design system for the organization to use in any framework. I think that people typically come to Stencil because they are interested in web components, but they stay because the developer experience is just really good. And that's the feedback that we've been constantly getting.
And it also seems like we've had teams that come in that tried to build a shared design system for their company using a specific framework, and the specific one doesn't matter because they're all
it's been
party.
All of them: Vue, React, Angular. And what happens is a lot of these teams get really excited about building this design system in a silo, right? So it's a React team that gets really excited about building a React-based design system. And then they take a look at across the company and realize that maybe a third of the company is using React and everyone else has just been left out.
Yeah, or some teams using Vue, or a different team is using Angular. I agree. I can't tell you how many times we've talked to companies and that's been like a major pain point.
It goes back to like our whole philosophy, which is like we don't really, like everyone's got their own preference, and a lot of these companies are letting teams pick what they want to use. Some companies don't. Some companies say we're using React for everything and that's how it's going to be. But I find that's less common, like especially with these big companies.
Right. So, that might be common in startups.
I think that's the common denominator here though, is it has to be and this is what makes it kind of so interesting. It has to be a large company. That's where that sort of like fragmentation starts happening, because rightfully so, teams are allowed to build, things that they as the tech team feel is correct. And there's going to be different opinions across different teams. I mean, look at Google, just as an example, as an analogy to what we're seeing just with framework use amongst teams in large organizations. You look at Google, they can't even get their web strategy straight in terms of like what they consider web standards or not. I'm not trying to pick on anyone, Flutter, but like they can't decide what is right for the web or not. You know what I mean? And different teams, you can tell that there's frustration from Googlers internally, and it bleeds out externally. And so like if you apply that analogy to other companies who are trying to build apps, who are trying to build centralized systems to move faster, like everyone's going to get in the same room and realize they've all been building the same components on different, technologies essentially.
Right.
And so it's like there's a reckoning that I think a lot of these companies are facing. And would you say that's kind of what we've been hearing?
Yeah, definitely. I think something we forget in our world, though, is that we think of applications as SPAs, right? As single page applications like Angular and React and Vue. But think about these large companies that have been around for a long time. I mean, how old SPAs have been out for what, like 8-9 years in mainstream. There's a lot of applications that are considered legacy that would just be like server-side rendered only applications. And if you're using a React-based or Angular-based component model, you now have to introduce a design system into these applications to add a framework on top of it. And it's just a big undertaking, where if you go with a web component model, it's very easy to drop components into any application that's based on the web.
Like one of the great examples is like a CMS, right? Like all these companies have CMSs. If you're going to put in a component, like it's much easier to just have custom HTML they can put in than, like you said, bootstrap an entire framework to render stuff.
Right. And we've heard people doing integrations with, what is it? SitePoint. Is that the right one? I've heard some people using it in WordPress. It's just all over the place.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. The solution now
also makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how we came across it, though. I mean, we essentially solved that problem for ourselves, and this is kind of where we ended up in solving it for a bunch of other teams.
That is, in fact, what
which is
Q&A
exciting.
stands for.
And it's, this is what Josh, by the way, I think just so
do
everyone knows, Josh has been spending a lot of time on this. So you have a lot of expertise on and knowledge on, what's going on in all of these companies and how Stencil is actually being consumed outside of how we use it internally at Ionic. And it's exciting. It's been really exciting.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that a lot of companies look to us, because how long have we had Ionic in the wild now?
Oof.
How many years?
Maybe 6 years.
So we have what we would consider to be a successful design system with high adoption over 6 years that we're continually upgrading and producing new features for. So it's a story that resonates really well because it's a success.
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, so aside from that, like just getting back to the like core developer experience of Stencil One, can you speak to, so we don't have Manu here. And if you're interested in more details, you should probably watch his talk from JSConf, but can we talk about the new compiler? Because I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think there was a big rewrite. Should I even say rewrite from 18 to 1 in the compiler that was mostly centered around the performance aspect of it. So the speed of the compilation with the new version of TypeScript, and then also the size of the files that are created from it.
Is it really a rewrite if the API is the same and all the tests pass?
Yes. It's a successful rewrite if the API is the same and the test pass, right? It's a refactor with great
That should be a Velociraptor meme right there, Max. We should make that into a. I think that's the right meme. I don't know.
I know Manu had worked on some really crazy like algorithms for the bundling process, and we actually talked with the Angular team about that last week as well. I think he called it machine learning inspired algorithm, which was really basically just like a lot of vector math.
I think Igor found that. I'll say amusing.
Yes.
I'll put it that way.
I think inspired is the important word to use there.
Yeah. In machine learning inspired bundling. Yeah. Cool.
But I mean, so to give the Stencil team some credit, and I can do that because I didn't have anything to do with Stencil. It like really seeing, frankly, some of the smallest bundle sizes of any front end tooling.
Yeah.
Seeing some of the best PWA scores, so like performance metrics, and a lot of that comes down to how we've really spent a lot of time optimizing bundling those components so you get the ones that you need as quickly as possible. A bunch of other optimizations that Josh and Manu can speak a lot more about, but that is all added up to something that builds really, really small components, but you can also use it to build apps. And that was like something that we've had in our back pocket as we've started to think about progressive web apps. The reality is like Stencil is actually also a really, really good tool for building fast PWAs. And that's something we haven't really pushed as much because we don't want to like confuse people. We don't want people to think like we're forcing them to abandon their framework to use Stencil. Like we don't really care about that. But the reality is it's actually much like React in the sense that it's a view. It's the view part of your framework, but we have things like routers. We have things like state management that you can put together to build real apps. And we are building our own real apps internally at Ionic, like a desktop IDE for Ionic called Studios built with Stencil. And you can build really, really high performing apps. So if you're interested in that, I would check it out because there's a good chance it'll be faster than really anything else out there. And I mean that like legitimately.
I mean, if you want to talk about a scenario, I mean, Swirkit's built with Stencil, right?
Yep.
It's Stencil and Ionic 4.
Yeah. Yeah, incredibly fast and massive user base.
So I will say that like people have been asking about what that use case, whether or not we're going to support it. I would say yes. We do want to have a like quote unquote starter or a workflow for Ionic where you can start with Stencil if you want to build apps with it. So we still think it's great for that. We don't want to like abandon that use case. We're just focusing on this like unique special thing that Stencil does that's really gotten a lot of interest.
Yeah.
That doesn't have a lot of other competition, frankly. It's kind of carving out its own niche. And so we kind of want to focus on that just from like the messaging and stuff, but it's still really great for building apps.
Yeah, totally. All right. Do we have time for a couple question and answer Q&A session? I guess I'll call it. Question and answers. All right. I don't want to run too long, but I feel like, we sent out these tweets asking for people to ask questions and we'd answer them. So I'm gonna read a couple to you guys and we'll do some rapid fire. You guys ready? All right. So the first one is from our dear old friend and coworker, ex-coworker, Justin Willis. He would like to know, what does the future of Stencil look like? Are there any big features in the works? Josh or anyone?
Like I said before, the number one feature is stability. I think that the product that we provided right now, the component model is really good. I think we're hearing feedback from people on things that they'd like to see, but I don't really have any features that I think they're in the pipe that I know of besides SSR, which is probably the biggest feature that people would be interested in.
Can I just pause for a second and say that stability as an answer to that is such a breath of fresh air. I mean, that is a big deal. And it just feels so good to be able to confidently say that. Maybe it's just I'm projecting my own frustrations with, not ever feeling like we had yes, we've had stable versions of products, but there's so much churn in this space that we're in that it, as a big feature, is just nice to say stability. It's like the big thing, no matter what version you end up going to.
I mean, that's essentially what 1.0 means, right?
That is what it means, yeah. All right, we'll move on, unless anyone else had anything to add.
Well, I mean, in a sea of things that are constantly changing, like the fact that Stencil and Capacitor, frankly, one of their goals is stability rather than constantly having a bunch of new stuff that you have to adapt to should be really relieving.
Yeah, that's exactly the sentiment I'm trying to get at. All right, Nicholas Mers wants to know, would we consider Capacitor ready for new projects? I would say absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely yes.
100%, 120% yes.
And why should we consider switching from Cordova?
For all the reasons that we already talked about, buddy.
All right, good point. Go back and listen to that, buddy. React release, ETA. I think we also talked about that. Mid-June. We're not going to say which year. Leon Oscar would like to know, will Ionic ever make the jump into semi-native, something like React Native or NativeScript?
We have people doing that today. So other people have made the jump for us. The reality is like you can embed Ionic into existing native apps, and you can do it with any old web view. It's like we see teams that have kind of a history where they have an existing native app they've been working on, but they want to start adding web content. Maybe they want to build out a few screens, enable like a new team that's more web development focused to work on the app. And so you can embed a web view, or you can embed Cordova, or you can embed Capacitor to actually have those screens run a different app. And so we are seeing people do that today. In terms of like where we, the vision for the project, like do we want to do a lot more of that? I would say we want to make it easy to do those types of things, but we're firmly focused on the web. We think it's a mistake if we do something where you put a bunch of code in your app to target iOS or Android natively that doesn't port to the web. And because one of the huge advantages is you're building an app, it just happens to run really well on iOS and Android and Electron on the web and whatnot. So we wouldn't want to do anything that violated that. However, there are some things that we've been casually looking into. Mixing native UI with a Cordova app is actually really easy. Most people don't even realize that it's happening. For example, when you load the camera, you're loading native UI. When you're loading like a native action sheet, that's a native UI. We have like biometric authentication that loads Face ID and scans your fingers. There's Google Maps plugins that use the native Google Maps. So there's not this like the separation between the web and native is much less clear than I think people make it out to be. And that's why they call it a hybrid app, because it is a little bit of web, it's a little bit of native, but it's still a native app that has access to all those SDKs. So we think that we can make it easier in some respects, but having all those plugins available is really the key thing that we want to enable, and enable you guys to build those yourselves.
Breaking down all that FUD. All right, Tony Awad would like to know from you guys, can you share with us what day-to-day tools you and the dev team use? What IDEs does the Ionic team use? Collaboration tools, architecture diagrams, CI/CD? What do you guys use? What's your like top 3 tools or
VS Code?
Yeah.
Number 1.
Yeah.
Xterm 2 for my console, because I usually live there, and Circle CI for all of our CI needs. We also use Browser Stack for all of our browser testing. So we do testing on all the different browsers for Ionic, and we use Browser Stack for it.
I use Vim.
I use VS Code with Vim bindings.
I thought you needed to know that. I actually do use VS Code with the Vim bindings, which, like, let's be honest, they're good, not great. There's some weird stuff about them lately.
Let's just be honest about that. All right.
There's stuff that's driving me bonkers. You've probably been seeing me tweet about it. I love VS Code, don't get me wrong, but I wish the Vim support was a little bit better.
I'm pretty sure VS Code has infected all of Ionic team. I think it's
infected the world.
One holdout here is Kevin, uses Atom still. And
that new company, that new app that's Coda.
Oh yeah. They have a new thing coming out. Panic, right?
Yeah.
Wait, do they make Coda?
No, I don't think that's Panic.
Panic makes. They make something.
Okay, you're right. It is Panic. So are they the ones coming up with the new
Yes. App? Yeah. Did you guys see that?
Yeah. So I'm sure that'll. No, because I'm like one of those people that I love Electron. Like I'm running like 5 Electron apps at the same time. When people complain like, oh, Electron sucks, I'm like, Electron's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. So I love that VS Code uses it.
No, I mean, I was asking, did you sign up for the new game controller that they're putting out? Panic is putting out. What's that thing called?
We're talking about a game controller, but yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. I was saying Panic.
I thought that's what you're talking about too.
No, I was talking about the new editor they're coming out with.
Okay, yeah, they're coming out with a new editor, and I was also saying, aren't they the same company that just announced that new like handheld controller, game controller?
Yeah, the Playdate.
Playdate, that's it. Where you twist the windy thing. Anyway,
I'm so hyped on that because Firewatch was amazing. I loved that game.
I
So
bought Firewatch on Steam on some bundle pack, and I have yet to play it.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna have to check that out. All right. Neen Odenker would like to know when is Ionic Vue going into stable release, or when is the stable release of Ionic Vue?
Well, we can't promise anything, but I've actually been working on it a little bit, trying to get it to the next release, fixing some stuff, adding vModel support. The routers, it needs some love. So, open question.
Okay. Yeah, no data on that yet, but we're working on it.
Yeah, it is at least on the priority list for us.
Okay. Eugene would like to know, will Ionic one day use WebAssembly?
Maybe.
I know we've talked about using Adam wants to like do some tests with WebGL, right? Or
There's some really cool stuff with WebAssembly that I saw specifically in like scanning barcodes. So there are some interesting applications we could use for utilities, but I don't really see it as something front and center for Ionic.
I don't know. All I know is like seeing Figma, for example, be successful with it. There's probably stuff we could do. I just don't know if you could get those benefits by writing JavaScript, right? Would you have to write like C++ or Go or something, or Rust to get those benefits, at least today?
don't ask me, but if we're talking about what tools we use every day, I use Figma all the time and I love it. And I love that it's spiritually aligned in many ways with what Ionic is, with what Ionic believes in, which is use the web. Good question.
Good question.
I don't know.
Adam, I know Adam has some thoughts. So
Yes, Adam certainly has thoughts.
go find him on Twitter.
Yeah, tweet at him. All right, last question. Troy Thompson wants to know, where do we see Ionic over the next decade?
Where do you see
Ionic-
yourself in 5 years? 10 years?
Does Ionic plan to consolidate audio and reality platforms like Alexa or Magic Leap in the future? Consolidate. Well, maybe means include.
We want you to do that. Great community. If you want that, go build some capacitor plugins.
That's a great answer, but that doesn't.
That would be amazing.
Where do we see Ionic in the next decade? Where do you see yourself in 10
ask the
years?
question, then you move to a new question.
Well, he had two questions.
Where do you see the web in the next decade?
Hey, that's the answer.
That's the answer.
Pose the question back at you.
Well, that is a good question. We don't know. There's some people who feel really concerned about the web, like browser world, and what's happening with native platforms. But Ionic is kind of, we're kind of in the middle, where in some respects, it's not as much about whether people are opening their browser and navigating to URLs and like the traditional web experience. We love that. We obviously want to see that continue to grow, and that's why PWAs and things are so important to us. But we're more focused on web technology at the core. So the fact that you can use web tech to build apps that go in the App Store is a different kind of use case for the web platform. It's kind of like the world where native is quote unquote king, but web technology is still very, very relevant. So we're in the middle of that whole debate, and we're on both sides.
Yeah.
However, I will say the thing that gets me excited about the web from like the open web standpoint is the fact that like PWAs are actually like a tangible business improvement. So you're seeing some really great data come out from companies like Pinterest, what have you, where they're seeing their actual KPIs or business metrics improved by embracing PWAs, because they're getting someone who's coming through Google search. They're not forcing them to go download the app, risk losing them. So I think that's where you're going to see like the web platform continue to grow, is the fact that it actually does have tangible business benefits, but it's at risk. Like the open web is at risk. And that's like something that we all need to recognize. And some of its biggest proponents are also potentially causing some of the biggest challenges for it. Like let's mention AMP as one of those open questions. Is that good for the open web or not? A lot of people disagree on that. So we're kind of going through a really interesting transition.
I will say on the PWA note, like if there's one thing that we can say for sure is that if something comes out and businesses can make more money from it, it probably isn't going to go anywhere. And PWAs has certainly shown itself to be incredibly monetarily beneficial to organizations. And so I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. I do agree with you. The AMP thing is concerning. And obviously there's different people on different sides of that discussion. And obviously there's other things floating around in the space, but we're just going to have to see how things play out. Our bet has always been, and will probably always continue to be, the web. It's been around for the past 30 years, and I think it's probably a good bet to say that it will be around for the next 30.
I think it's like, that's the thing, is the web technology, the technologies you use, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, we think that is only going to continue to be relevant and grow, and people continue to learn it. It's like the number one most known technology stack. It's the most ubiquitous, most like generally useful on all the platforms. And so we believe in that first and foremost. And we hope that trickles down into making sure the open web still stays nice and healthy. So that's open question.
Yeah, agreed. Good answer though. Putting you on the spot a little bit. All right. Well, I think that
so
should.
I didn't answer the question though, because that's
okay.
like, where do we see Ionic?
Well, I think that my interpretation of your answer was, wherever the web is going to be, Ionic is going to be there.
Yes, and without spending a lot more time talking, I will just say that our goal as a company is to kind of be the commercial leader in web technology. So there's a lot of like companies building open source stuff. There's Google and Facebook, Google and Apple, and what have you, Mozilla building like the fabric of it. But Ionic is really helping companies go to market with web tech and being successful with it, and pushing things like Stencil and Capacitor and Ionic forward. We want to help teams building mission critical stuff. So as the web technology space grows and people are building serious stuff, we want to be the commercial leader in it. So in 5 to 10 years, we hope that means that we're working with a lot more people, building a lot more stuff, and still successful.
Yeah. Good call out. I think that's important to mention. And we've been talking a lot about that internally recently as well. So probably worth echoing it. We're a web company. Okay. Well, unless anyone else has any last words, I figure we should close this one up, close the book on this show. It was a longer one, probably longer than we intended it to be, but we haven't done one of these in a while. So it was nice to get together and sit down with all of you. So I think that's it. And thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. If you've gotten this far, we hope to do more shows like this. They're certainly easier for us to get people together and jump on and hang out and talk. So let us know what you think. If you like this format, I certainly enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time.